Hey, this is the Heart with Tony Schaefer, powered by Sig Sauer. Never settle. I had a choice of what I carried in combat. You should carry the best. I carry the best. The best is Sig Sauer. Never settle. Today, getting out my old reliable M17. I'm sorry, M18. I misspoke. M18 version of the P320. Great weapon. Can't go wrong. So this is the version of the current U.S. Army and U.S. Marine Corps weapon. Shorter barrel, but I've got the metal set frame, the AXG frame. Get it. Anyway, Sig Sauer, never settle. We are on the America Out Loud Talk Radio Network, also on their podcast network. We are Project Sentinel, projectsentinel.com. And on X, we are at PRJ_Sentinel. That's us. And we are also sponsored by Swiss America. Check out the special Walking Liberty $50 offer. We always recommend hard currency. Hard currency is something you will never regret having because it will never go away. It's unlike the dollar, the fiat dollar, who could vanish tomorrow with little a trace. So get something that is durable. Get something that is going to endure no matter what happens economically. The Walking Liberty $50 offer, 800-289-2646. Again, 800-289-2646. Tell them Tony Schaefer sent you. And you can check out our past shows on thehearttruthwithtony.com. And then without further ado, I'm going to introduce the crew. First off, back from Ed McMahon's School of Broadcasting is Chris Cordani. Chris, say hello to good folks.
Heyo!
Heyo!
I did a lot of weightlifting. I did a lot of weightlifting at that camp, by the way.
He did, and he actually passed the drinking a pint of vodka and carrying a surfboard across the Ventura Highway. So that's a tough one because you got to dodge traffic too, and he did it. So
and I had to lift weights so I can bring those bring around those big checks to people's houses.
That's right. And of course the extreme and triangular Elizabeth Breckenkamp joining us again from Lake Anna, I think, right?
I'm triangular.
Yes,
and
you cover all three important points: goodness, graciousness, and beauty. There you go. See, triangle.
Oh, well, thank you for that clarification.
There you go. See,
that's
and then of course we have our we appreciate our guest putting up with us, Robert Spencer. Robert Spencer's joining us for a serious discussion, and of course, we will have a serious discussion on his work, his latest book, Muhammad: A Critical Biography. So, Robert, welcome to The Hard Truth.
Thanks, Tony. Great to be here.
Yeah. So, as we mentioned in the pre-show, I worked for Dr. Herb London, who was someone who did a lot of research in the same area you work, and he helped educate me on some of the realities of Islam, to include. Yeah, that Muhammad guy, he ain't such a good guy. He's done some things to really damage, I think, humanity, if that's not too broad a term to say. But let's talk a little bit about the book and then go into the deeper philosophy. So just tell us about what is the book about and what inspired you to write it?
Well, in the first place, Herb's absolutely right. Muhammad's been one of the most dangerous, damaging people who ever lived, if he did live. His teachings still inspire people to do evil around the world today. And they think that when they do it, they are doing good and getting blessings from Allah, the supreme God. And so it's even worse. It's actually a fulfillment of something that we can read in the New Testament, where Jesus says the time will come when men will kill you and think they're offering service to God. That's Islam. So that comes from Muhammad. And even to this day, as I say, you got all kinds of jihadis everywhere invoking Muhammad's example and his words to justify what they're doing. So in the first place, it's very important for us as non-Muslims and as targets of the jihad to know what Muhammad is supposed to have said and taught. And so that's one thing that's in the book. But the other part of the book is an examination of whether any of this really actually happened at all. And I go into the earliest stories about Muhammad in Islamic tradition and show that they're full of contradictions, they're full of disagreements, and it's more likely that these are myths and legends that were made up for political reasons than actual historical accounts. And that's actually one of the reason why Islam is even more dangerous because it's inherently political. It's not primarily about uniting human beings with God, although it claims to do that, but it is also a political system for the supremacy of the believers on this earth. And that's also causing a lot of violence and misery around the world, and has been for 1400 years.
Well, that's part of my issue, having been politically neutral as a kid. I mean, I went to high school in Lisbon, Portugal. My dad was part of the military. So I grew up around a community that was, I think, I don't want, they were educated, but not religious. That is to say that Lisbon in the late 70s, post Salazar, world was changing, a little bit of communist influence here and there. I was friends with DJ Neto, the nephew of the Angolan dictator Neto. Had friends who were Nelly was an Algerian, a black girl. So we were very cosmopolitan. I had Russians, we had Chinese there. So I don't believe I had any hard belief regarding religion. But the one thing I've learned over the years is that many religions today don't use violence as a means of encouraging people to either join or become subordinated to it. I mean, the Catholic Church had its issues. I know we had the Inquisitions and some other things that have happened, but at this point, most people can as rightly say, Christianity went through a number of reforms. It has become a religion of, I think, that accepts people for who they are. The Jews, for example, you go to Israel. I'm pretty sure you can be gay, lesbian, you can be transgendered, you could be whatever the heck you want. Heck, you could be like Tim Walz and go have things with horses. Nobody would care. Just saying. Not that I'm saying you did it. I don't know that, but I'm just saying if he did, it'd be okay. But my point to you, Robert, is that Herb instructed me over and over that the two things that we have to watch in any organization that claims to be religious is when they become a political entity, and when it becomes something that believes that it must use a military system of operations to inflict itself on others. Would that be a good way of assessing what Islam has become today in many aspects?
100%, Tony. It's not just today either. It's all the way through, because in the earliest traditions about Muhammad, he becomes a political and military leader, and that's actually 12 years after he becomes a prophet, supposedly.
Wow.
And that's the beginning of Islam. If you go look at the Islamic calendar, I always forget what year it is. It's 1400 something. And the first year one of the Islamic calendar, is not when Muhammad was born or when he died or when he became a prophet. It's when he became a political and military leader. That's the beginning of Islam. And so it's the subtext there, the lesson there, is that Islam is never really fully Islam unless it's political and military.
Yeah. Well, and I've said over and over that based on that premise, there's no room for Islam within the context of the Constitution or our system of governance, because if you accept Islam in its tenets, anybody who doesn't believe a certain way, they're not considered human beings. They're essentially chattel. And women, as I understand it, I'm not a huge scholar of it, but I understand Elizabeth could be essentially treated as property, according to their basic beliefs of Sharia. Is that correct?
Absolutely, yeah. You got in the Quran that women can be beaten, and it doesn't even say beaten if they're disobedient. It says beaten if you fear disobedience from them. So if you think she's going to get out of line, then you can smack her. And that's not the only thing. Muhammad said, I had a vision, and most of the inhabitants of hell are women. And the women get upset.
I didn't hear that one. Man, I'd like to use that.
This is more in the traditions about Muhammad. And the women get upset, and they ask him why. And he says, because you're deficient in religion and deficient in intelligence. And they say, what are you talking about? And he says, you're deficient in religion because during menstruation you can't go to the mosque. which is a rule, of course, he made up. And
Right.
you're deficient in intelligence because the Quran says in chapter 2, verse 282, that if you are dealing in a court issue, you get one male witness or two female witnesses.
Mhm.
Because obviously Muhammad says women aren't as intelligent as men, so you need two of them to be the equivalent of one man for testimony. And so this is also something he made up. And then he's using that against them to say, you're deficient in these ways and are filling hell.
Wow.
Mhm.
So
There's
I find it.
more of this too.
Yeah, yeah.
Wow.
So
Well,
let's continue to talk about Muhammad in the book, because I think so much of the world, there's a big percentage of folks who now believe that the teachings of Islam is the word of God. I would argue, from what you're saying, it's actually the word of Satan. If Satan was going to create a religion that was going to be the counter of Western religions such as Catholicism and Christianity, it would be Islam. Is that too strongly stated?
Well, Tony, consider this. There's another hadith. The hadith are the traditions about what Muhammad said and did. There's very little about Muhammad in the Quran, nothing at all.
Right.
Matter of
Well,
fact,
some say he's a pedophile too. I mean, there's some other things
Yeah.
out there that.
Oh,
that's
yeah.
true too.
Yeah.
But you talk about how it's devised to counter Christianity in the West.
Right.
Think about this. Muhammad says that on the day of judgment, there will be nobody more hateful in the sight of Allah than the one who calls himself the King of Kings. Now, who's
Oh.
that? But in Christianity, it's very common to call Jesus the King of Kings.
Right. Christ.
that's right.
There it is. And
Yeah.
so we're talking
Wow.
about just the opposite thing. This is what the prophet Isaiah says in the Old Testament. Woe to
Mhm.
those who call good evil and evil good.
Mhm. Yep.
So I'm curious as to, and by the way, please check out his book. It is pre-order available on Amazon. Chris, make sure you let the folks see that if you can. Make sure they see that again there. So go check it out on Amazon. I think people need to educate themselves on this, because this is not something you're going to see in the mainstream media, because certain political parties have essentially adopted a view that somehow Muhammad and Islam is a valid form of religion that we should accept. Now, I am, as I mentioned, I grew up to be, in a very open society. A lot of people accepted things in Europe, and I came back to the United States and, became reacclimated, went through college here, and obviously spent 30 and a half years being a spy. So I've been exposed to a lot of different competitive, and I got a degree in political science. So I do understand comparative political concepts and ideologies. It's not like I'm not versed in this. But
I wanted to be a spy, but I don't think I look good in a trench coat.
well, I got to tell you, one of the things you first learn is you have to be able to handle a quart of vodka and a quart of Jack Daniels in a 2-hour period. So if you can't do that,
The
it's
vodka,
a very difficult. Yeah. But my point to you is that within the context of all this, nobody in political science ever addressed political Islam. Why is it we have a hard time accepting the political aspects of Islam, Robert? Why do they deny that?
well, there are a lot of reasons. One of them is that America is based on, or was based, let me say, before all this crazy wokeness and everything, and the celebration of the most incredible delusions and depravities and insanities and everything else.
Mhm.
Before that, if you go back to like when I was a young man, probably much older than all of you, but same general area, 1960s, 70s, 80s, that was sort of the end of it. But starting, I think, in the 1920s, 30s, 40s, maybe even before that, there was this idea that it was good to be religious, and it didn't matter which religion you were, because that was a matter between you and God and your conscience. Right. But it mattered that you were religious. And Eisenhower even said that. He said, I don't care what religion you belong to, but every American should have a religion. Yeah. And this was and of course, when Eisenhower said that, and when this was part of the American landscape, American culture, people were thinking of different kinds of Christianity and Judaism. And that's it. Nobody was thinking about Islam. There weren't any Muslims here, and nobody knew anything about Islam. But when Muslims started to come here, most people just assumed, well, this is another religion. And what we know about religions is that they have their disagreements, but they all teach you to be good. They all teach you to be kind and magnanimous and generous and thoughtful. And so everybody should be religious. The idea of a religion that teaches you to hate and to be violent and to conquer and subjugate and enslave and rape, that's completely foreign to the American mindset. Nobody ever thought of anything like this since Thomas Jefferson and John Adams were dealing with the Barbary pirates in 1800. Yeah. And since then, it's completely gone out. And also, there's a concerted effort. Islam is the only religion that has a public relations arm. And they lie about what it's about. And they say Islam, you get Muslim spokesmen, top-level Muslim spokesmen, and they'll tell you Islam is a religion of peace, and we teach tolerance and love and peace. You know, like after 9/11, and there were so many people on television all the time saying that Muhammad would be horrified by what happened on 9/11, and it has nothing to do with Islam. And most people probably still think that. And that is absolutely 100% false. And
so there, and I've
I remember President Bush had said that. I remember. I remember he said that. Like,
well, let's talk about that in a second. I do want to go through the issue of their own PR firm.
Yes.
But I want to cover something else relating to what you said about the origins and concepts of the actual fabric of the religion. Now, I've been in combat several times, multiple times. I've done everything from leading covert actions in Northern Africa against Al-Qaeda to being in direct combat with elements of both the Sunni Shia and Afghanistan. And a lot of people don't understand. I mean, Robert, you probably not read my book, but Operation Dark Heart, we actually cover and there was an interrogation of a U.S. citizen in Gardez, West and Eastern Afghanistan, who was sent over to actually fund the insurgency against us from Herat and the Iranians. IRGC was sending people in. So the Sunni and Shia both were just, trying to kill us. Just saying. Mm-hmm. There is a split, but both sides hate us. Just saying.
Oh, yeah.
But, my point being is that we have been facing these folks since the 9/11 attacks. And I think it's been fascinating to see that so many people try to explain it away. Some groups accept the fact that there is violence in Islam. One of them I deal with is the Association of British Muslims. They are based in England. I've dealt with them, and they're the first to say is like, yeah, we've got to reform. Our religion has a fundamental problem in that we allow our religion to kill people. Mm-hmm. They're a small minority. There's a small minority I know in Baltimore that feels the same way, but they never get hurt because they're shouted down. Because the moment they say there's a problem in their religion, oh, you're clearly anti-Islam. It's like, I'm Islamic. What are you talking about? But even their own voices, Robert, get shouted down. Even when their own internal kind of religious leaders say, yeah, we got a problem. Another guy said this and was ignored. I actually said this on Bill O'Reilly's show, and Bill said, who? What? I actually was on. I talked about Al-Sisi going to the Al-Aqsa Mosque and saying that, and I think this was in 2009 or to 2010, that he himself, as a War College graduate, President Al-Sisi said, we must remove violence as a tenet of our religion, but they all get ignored.
Yeah, they get ignored for a very particular reason. Chapter 5, verse 3 of the Quran says, this day I have perfected your religion for you. That's Allah speaking to human beings. So if it's perfect, if you change it, you're just making it worse.
Wow.
And so the reformers not only face that, but there's also a death penalty for heresy and apostasy. And there's a very fine line between heresy and apostasy and reform. In other words, if I come to you and I say, I'm going to give you a new kind of Islam that is nonviolent, then all the Al-Qaeda people or ISIS or any of those groups need to do is go through the Quran and show where it tells you to be violent. And then they say, you're a heretic. You're not a reformer. You're an apostate. So you take Mahmoud Muhammad Taha, for example. He did exactly that. He was a reformer in Sudan in 1985. And he said that the Meccan verses should take precedence over the Medina instead of the other way around. In the Quran, there are two kinds of passages. ones that are considered to come from Mecca, the early part of Muhammad's career, and the others that come from Medina, the second half of Muhammad's career. And this is important because the Medinan ones take precedence over the Meccan, and the Medinan ones are more violent. So Mahmud Muhammad Taha said, flip it around, make the peaceful ones take precedence over the violent ones, and he was hanged as a heretic by the Sudanese government in 1985.
Well, I know that Sudan's been a hotspot, remains a hotspot. I know we spent time, my old boss, Colonel Giddens, actually went there as part of the Danforth Commission. He was part of the group to negotiate the separation of South Sudan to make it a Christian nation because of Islamic violence. Imagine that. There's a theme there, Robert. Who'd have thought? And I think that's what. So we've, I think, established clearly. Your book will demonstrate to folks. They need to pick it up. Go check it out on Amazon. The idea here is that Islam, from the beginning, based on Muhammad or the image of Muhammad may not even be real. This may be a bunch of stories put together, created for purposes of a religious movement, which it is. We've established that as kind of something people need to be educated on. We've established that it's a political system, not a religion. That it uses violence as a tenet.
Too, but it's also a political system.
But it is, but political, and I think more political than religious. Just saying, because they use religion as a vector to inflict it onto others. And then, but my last question, which I wanted to get to, is why on earth does, after Western civilization kind of opened the door to it, why have they let it in and kind of let it rent a room in their house in the situation regarding Hamas and Islamic violence? And I'll be very blunt on this. We have elements of the United States government, United States political system, who are literally taking the side of terrorists. After the 7th October attack, you've seen over an abundance of not only anti-Semitic acts, of violence, of protests in all the big Ivy League colleges. You've seen it in cities. There was just a protest this past weekend. It's one thing to have students who are stupid. I mean, Kamala Harris even, said young people are stupid. So don't take my word for it. Go talk to Kamala Harris, who, by all accounts, she's not that bright, but she gets that point correct. Just saying.
I do believe Kamala's an expert on stupid, but
yeah, there you go. She calls it out, and she is. So there, it
takes one to know one. I guess that's what they say.
So, but my point to you, Robert, is how is it people like Randy Weingarten, who is a teacher, who actually made statements today, or was within the last 24 hours, saying that Benjamin Netanyahu, not Hamas, is to blame for the death of the hostages and the events of 7 October. How is it we have people of Jewish faith attacking their own faith and attacking their own people?
Well, they've been programmed like this. And it goes back to what I was saying before, that Americans kind of have a knee-jerk reaction that anything that's a religion must be good and benign and to be encouraged. And then you combine that with the very skillful PR campaign that we've touched upon briefly already.
Yeah, I'm going to talk about that next. Yeah,
Islamic leaders use in the West, and we can go back to 9/11, and 6 days on September 17th, 6 days after 9/11, September 17th, 2001, George W. Bush went into the big mosque in Washington D.C. in front of Nihat Awad of the Council on American Islamic Relations, which has been named by the Justice Department as an unindicted co-conspirator in a Hamas terror funding case, and Abdurrahman al-Amoudi of the American Muslim Council, who's now doing 23 years in prison for financing al-Qaeda. And George Bush stood in front of those two guys and some other Muslim leaders, and he said, Islam is peace. Now, why did he do that? And he did a lot of damage by doing that, because he made it much more difficult for the U.S. government and military to address the motivating ideology behind the problem.
Oh, trust me, I faced that personally. Right.
Oh, yeah. So why did they do it? Nihat Awad and Abdurrahman al-Amoudi and the others, I'm certain, told him, you have to do this. It's very important, because otherwise innocent Muslims will be victimized and brutalized in America. And people don't remember this, but he also spent a long time in that speech warning Americans not to be mean to Muslims.
I remember
not
that.
to bother women wearing hijab on the street.
I do remember that. Yeah.
This was the problem.
Yeah.
That 3,000 Americans are dead, and he's worried that somebody with a hijab is going to get yelled at on the street. And the thing is that the Muslim groups have very skillfully portrayed any honest examination of the jihad ideology as discrimination and bigotry and racism. And so they've been able to get the left and a good bit of the right into fearing to speak about these things because they think, I don't want to be accused of racism. I don't want to be thought of as Islamophobic and bigoted. And so we'll just play along and say Islam is peace, and we won't get into what the real violent aspects of the religion.
Well, we'll cover that again in part 2 of the show. We have Robert Spencer with us. Muhammad, a critical guide, a critical biography is what we're talking about today. We'll take a short break and be right back. Hey, this is The Hard Truth. Tony Schaefer, part 2, still powered by Sig Sauer, never settle. I had a choice of what I carried in combat. You should carry the best. I carried the best in combat. The best is Sig Sauer. Never, ever settle. We're also sponsored by Swiss America. Get a free copy of their Secret War in Cash newsletter, 800-289-2646. Tell them Tony Schaefer sent you, 800-289-2646. Be aware, people are after your cash. Don't let them get it. So call today. We are on the America Out Loud Talk Radio Network and the America Out Loud Podcast Network. Check us out, projectsentinel.com. Project Sentinel is on X is PRJ_Sentinel. We're there doing stuff. And here are past shows on the hardtruthwithtony.com. Oh, don't forget, Cherie Curry, our dear friend. Cherie does our bumper and theme music. We'll be seeing her hopefully on the show sometime soon. Her big birthday party with Marie, her sister, is going to be at the Whiskey A Go-Go on 1 November. I'm hoping to be there. So check it out. You can go check it out online. She's going to have all sorts of cool things to mark her 65th anniversary. Man, still rocking at 65. You go, girl.
That's
I mean,
right.
Cherie. You go, Cherie. Anyway, we're back again for part 2 of the show. We still have Robert Spencer with us. Robert, thank you for being here with us today. We're talking about his book, Muhammad, a critical biography. And man, oh man, are we being critical? And I think in an important way. And the way Islam has been portrayed is this sacred cow or sacred goat. Can I say goat and Islam in the same sentence? I guess I can. So, by the way, is there a scratch and sniff section for goats in the back of your book? No, I shouldn't say that. I'm going to get you in so much trouble. Don't answer that. They'll get you in trouble.
It's just
You'll find out when you buy it. When you buy the book, you'll find out.
the stories in this book you don't want to smell.
So there you go. Get the book. So, but my point being is that so much of what Islam has done as an entity has been able to convince people that it's not bad. Oh, it's not. We're not bad. Oh, you hear all these stories. It's not really bad. You've got CARE, the Council on Islamic American Relations, as well as the Muslim Brotherhood. The Muslim Brotherhood, I think, is one of the most evil organizations on the planet because it is, I think, a feeder organization for both the civilized version of undermining Western civilization and violence. So let's start with CARE. What can you say about CARE that people need to understand?
CARE, in the first place, is founded out of Hamas. It was founded by two guys, Nihad Awad and Omar Ahmed, who had been in the Islamic Association for Palestine. The Islamic Association for Palestine no longer exists because it was shut down by the U.S. government for being a Hamas front. CARE was founded in the 1990s and 1994 because the American Muslim leaders, including Awad and Omar Ahmed, they decided that Hamas needed an advocacy group in the United States. But CARE has become much more than that. It is tied to Hamas, but it is essentially an advocacy group for opposition to anything that is trying to stop terrorism. And they were named, as I noted before, an unindicted co-conspirator in a Hamas terror funding case. Nihad Awad is still the head of it. And right after October 7th, he said that he was made happy by the October 7th attacks. I was on shows years ago with this guy, Hussam Iloush, who is the head of CARE Los Angeles, and he repeatedly refused to denounce Hamas and Hezbollah as terrorist groups. Meanwhile, CARE has operatives that work all over the country at all levels of government, and they work with politicians. Politicians want to get the Muslim vote. They want to get photo ops. So they get with these guys without realizing who they are and what they're about. And so they end up becoming vehicles for infiltration and for CARE to extend its influence. They've opposed every counterterror measure that's ever been proposed or implemented in the United States. They actively work for the goals of Hamas and the global Muslim Brotherhood. They are a Muslim Brotherhood organization.
Right.
Muslim Brotherhood, of course, as you noted, it's pretty hardcore, very evil international organization founded in 1928 to restore the caliphate. In Islamic thought, the caliph is the successor of Muhammad as the political, military, and spiritual leader of the Muslims. And there's supposed to be a whole unity among Muslims of the whole world under the caliph as the single governing authority. Now, that's never been true in practice. There have been caliphates, but there have also been other Muslims that didn't accept the caliphates.
Right.
And yet, nowadays, there's no caliphate. It was abolished in 1924. And so the Muslim Brotherhood was founded in 28 to try to bring back the caliphate, to extend the rule of Islamic law over the world. And as you stated, Tony, it works in both violent and nonviolent ways. Hamas says, we are the Muslim Brotherhood for Palestine. And so Hamas, of course, is very violent. But also in the West, all the major Muslim organizations in the world, in the United States, are tied to the Muslim Brotherhood in some way or another. And the Muslim Brotherhood, according to a captured internal document that was discovered in the 90s, actually in 2007, written in the 90s, says the brothers must understand that their work in America is a kind of grand jihad in eliminating and destroying Western civilization from within and sabotaging its miserable house by their hands, that is the hands of the Westerners, and the hands of the believers, so that it falls and Islam is victorious over other religions.
Yeah.
If you look at what CARE does, it's very hard not to think this is a group dedicated to getting America to destroy itself, eliminating and destroying Western civilization from within by their own hands.
Well, it's very obvious. As I mentioned, I opened by commenting on the Biden administration's lack of response and the Democrat Party becoming the party of anti-Semitism. I think Robert, you might agree with me. I think it's pro-jihad. The Democrat Party today is pro-jihad, and it's in everything it does. Would you agree with that?
100%. Look at what happened with Rashida Tlaib and Awad of CARE. Rashida Tlaib, the congresswoman from Michigan, and Nihad Awad from CARE, Council on American Islamic Relations, held a rally not long after October 7th, and they threatened Biden. They said, if you don't make Israel stop fighting, if you don't call for a ceasefire, which would enable Hamas to survive, when the Israelis have said, we're going to fight until Hamas is completely destroyed, then you're not going to get you're not going to get a single Muslim vote in Michigan or anywhere else. And Nihad was listing off all the swing states and saying, you're not going to get a single vote in Arizona or Florida, Georgia, or any of the swing states. And trying to give the impression, of course, that the Muslims could make the difference in those states, and trying to get Biden to stop the Israelis so that Hamas would survive. Now, Biden fell into line. He gave $10 billion in unfrozen assets to Iran. So we are now financing both sides of the war between Israel and Hamas because Iran.
It's insane. No, it's insane. I want to
shipments to Israel. He did so many other things to betray Israel, and it's all because of CARE and trying to get the Muslim vote.
Well, at this point, my friend Brigadier General Blaine Holt says all the time, it's the three-state solution of Michigan, Wisconsin, and Minnesota. That's the three states they're seeking, because that's the. And so, I'll open it up here in a second. But one last thing for you, Robert, on that point. There's no hope at this point that if Kamala Harris wins, that the Israelis are going to get any support from any American government. It's Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think that it's pretty clear that if Kamala Harris, if she wins, then that will be the end of the U.S.-Israeli alliance. That there'll be a complete repudiation by the U.S. government of Israel, and it will join the other states that denounce Israel at the UN.
Yeah, Elizabeth, anything else you want to jump in with?
Yeah. So, in the first half, I know we had ended with talking about Islamophobia, and I was actually looking at one of Robert's other books, The Politically Incorrect Guide to Islam. And in here, I mean, there's just such a great wealth of information. But I thought it was interesting. You're talking about the word Islamophobia came around like in the late 1980s, early 1990s. And apparently, the UN, they didn't help to help clarify, that's just misleading, and to really speak the truth about the roots, like we're talking about here. And you have in here, the UN has condemned Islamophobia while turning a blind eye to atrocities committed by jihadists. The charge of Islamophobia is used to intimidate and silence critics of violent jihad in Islam. And some groups are even trying to brand those who tell the truth about Islam and jihad as purveyors of hate speech. And then you have something in here about Stephen Schwartz. He's a journalist and Islamic apologist. He's basically saying, oh, it's not a myth. Islamophobia is real. It's all about attacking the entire religion of Islam as a problem for the whole world. I mean, there's so much good information in here. And I was just wondering if you wanted to talk about that, because it's absolutely true. And that's one of the reasons why we have this show, is to really educate people, let them understand it's okay to dig deeper and to critique things, to look at the roots and, of religions, or in this case, it's more of a political thing. But I was just wondering if you had anything to add to that or explain.
Yeah, well, thank you. Islamophobia has been very successful, maybe one of the most successful propaganda initiatives in the history of the world. They make up this word and they use it. It's now classed in, the Biden administration routinely refers to anti-Semitism and Islamophobia. And whenever anybody, like college presidents these days, people like that, whenever they condemn anti-Semitism, they throw in Islamophobia as if they're equivalent. Now, anti-Semitism is a real phenomenon that goes back thousands of years and has a variety of causes. And Islamophobia is totally made up. People are victimizing Jewish students on campuses all over the country these days. Just recently at the University of Pittsburgh, this guy attacked 2 Jewish students with a glass bottle, cut their faces.
Oh, yeah.
This kind of thing is happening increasingly. This is not happening to Muslims, and it should not happen, of course, to Muslims or to anyone. But the idea that Islamophobia is some equivalence to this real phenomenon is just fantasy. But they've used it to scare people into thinking they better not talk about the reasons why Islamic jihadis think that it's righteous to kill people, because if they do, then they'll be racist and bigoted and Islamophobic. And it's been a tremendous shell game, an enterprise of fooling the American people, and it's worked great.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. You mentioned that people have to. I mean, I've just never cared. It's like, you're Islamophobic. It's like, you're a racist. Like, yeah, I don't care. I just don't care.
Everything's phobic these days.
Yeah, it's like you get to a point. It's like, it's like, I'm not. I'm sorry.
It's a playground insult.
If you really know you're not, then it doesn't faze you. Unfortunately, a lot of people, they do let it affect them. They let that intimidate them. It's like, well, no, I'm not. You don't have to defend yourself when you know it's not true. But it's just.
It's a playground insult. That's what it's a playground insult, saying, you don't like it, you're chicken. That's basically what you're chicken. That's what I'm calling it. I have something for all of you.
In the sandbox.
Yeah, I'm in the sandbox. Robert, you were talking about George W. Bush last segment and how he kept trying to tell us Islam's a religion of peace. Islam's all peaceful, trying to keep everybody politically correct in the 2000s. Well, let me tell you, I know you know this, and I'm pretty sure much of our audience knows that a warning was sent by a past president about Islam and negotiating with Muslim countries. I want to take a clip of a paper by John Quincy Adams. I want to read it here.
Oh.
The precept of the Quran is perpetual war against all who deny. that Muhammad is the prophet of God, that the vanquished may purchase their lives by the payment of tribute, the victorious may be appeased by a false and delusive promise of peace, the faithful follower of the prophet may submit to the imperious necessities of defeat, but the command to propagate the Muslim creed by the sword is always obligatory when it can be made effective. The commands of this prophet may be performed alike by fraud or by force. And that's what Netanyahu was saying earlier on Wednesday, where he says these terrorist organizations will come back unless they are eradicated.
Right.
Yeah.
And our presidents today don't even heed the warning.
Adams was completely right, but nowadays, if he said that, there would be a huge firestorm in the media, and people would be calling on him to resign and saying he was racist.
Yes.
But there's nothing racist about this. We're talking about ideas. The ideas don't have a race. And if you have the idea that God will bless you for conquering and subjugating other people, then that's a dangerous idea, and it's not racist to say so.
Well, I think that's the thing at this point, that people have been so mollified by the U.S. media to ignore this, to pretend it's something else. And then the very people who you would think would be most vigorously defending are joining the other side. Again, Randy Weingarten, the folks who pretend to be supporters of Israel. I mean, it's caused some real issues all across society. And one of the places I've been most, I think, mortified to see is within the context of the students who are so ill-equipped to understand context are the ones most vigorously defending the other side. And come on, Robert, gays and lesbians for Hamas? Come on! I mean, what? What craziness!
You know what's really wild about it is that more than once now, there have been Muslim clerics in Gaza saying, we don't want your support. Go away.
No.
We don't want you around. We think you're disgusting. We don't want anything to do with you. And yet the Queers for Palestine, as they call themselves, they just keep at it. They never seem to get a clue.
Yeah, no. It's like fundamentally their existence is they don't accept your existence, and they don't accept it to the point of where they will remove you from existence if you show up.
Right. But they don't quite understand that, because there's a bias people have where everybody's going to act just like us. This is why the Western nations are telling Israel, just go in, beat up Hamas a few times and come back. They won't bother you again for a while. Well, even Netanyahu said, well, you people said that about Lebanon. They'd bomb us. We'd beat them up. We'd come back. They wouldn't come back. And if they do, you'd support us. And you know what he said flat out on Wednesday this week? He said, no, you didn't. You didn't do that. And that's what we're saying. You can't trust them, because it's the religious doctrine to spread what they're doing, or spread their philosophy by the sword and by fraud if they have to.
So, Robert, I said back in March when Kamala and what's that guy? The guy that was president, Biden. That's the guy.
Joe.
Joe. Lunch Bucket Joe, or Crooked Joe, depending on what day it is. Yeah, no, I've met the guy. I've testified before him. And, anyway. But my point being is that back in March, General Holt, Blaine, and my partner on Newsmax, Blaine and I said that you dare not show weakness, that they need to go in no matter what the White House says and go into Rafah, just be done with it. And yet you had Kamala Harris on record saying, oh, no, I've studied the maps.
Yeah.
That's a map. I've studied the maps, and I don't think it's a good idea.
That's the map to Candyland. That's what.
Apparently, she's also
like
studied
the island of the
buses.
Is it the forest of misfit toys or something you were looking at? Anyway, and you had Biden. You had Biden literally threatening to withhold weapon systems. So I think they made a mistake. That is the Israelis. They should have gone in. What do you think, Robert? And I'll leave it to the rest of the team.
Well, a very tough decision, because the United States is their only friend.
I know.
And if the United States turns against them, then you got total isolation on the international stage. I can understand why they delayed, but there's no doubt now that the delay cost the lives of those hostages.
Oh yeah.
Like, if they'd been able to go right into Rafah at that time, they might have been able to save them.
Yeah.
Well,
I'm with you.
I'm under the understanding that the people who are holding the hostages, again, this is what I've been reading, were under orders if the IDF came close to kill some or all the hostages. So, yeah, this is. I'm pretty sure that that the Israeli intelligence knew this was not going to end well.
Mhm.
Either
Well,
way,
The more you delay, the more you give them time.
but you have to save the
Never
other
delay.
people too. Yeah, you have
Never
to save
delay.
others. Right.
They have been able to rescue some of the hostages alive, so it was worth a try.
Yep.
Right. Exactly.
Mm.
Agreed.
All right,
Yeah,
Chris,
I
did
agree.
you have something you want to do?
I think we have to do this because it is
Uh-oh.
that time. It's time for Tony's Takes. Robert, you're in for a good one. We like to do this. We do Tony's Takes on things that are happening today. And yes, Robert, it's going to be Tony, Elizabeth, and Robert's Takes. And it's all powered by Sig Sauer. Never settle.
Never
And
settle.
Never settle.
The only
Never
thing we
settle.
settled for is the man in lieu of a president. That's what we have now. Okay, but here we go. Benjamin Netanyahu pushed back. See, this goes with what we're talking about. So how about that? Benjamin Netanyahu pushed back at world pressure earlier this week, having to outline and explain why Israel needs to eliminate Hamas and secure the Philadelphia corridor at the Gaza-Egypt border. He also said the world has not supported Israel as promised before. We just touched on that. So basically, they're not supporting him now. As a matter of fact, they're trying to chastise Israel for defending itself. He had to actually spell it out for people this week as to why they have to do what they're doing. What's your take, Tony?
So my take is the new Biden plan is the one to go with, where I think he plans on putting a series of Subway sandwich shops into the Philadelphia corridor so they can make Philadelphia cheesesteak sandwiches. I think that's George. I think that's Joe's solution.
Oh.
That's what I heard anyway. It's a rumor. I can't confirm it. Just
That's the rumor. Oh my gosh.
I mean, who wouldn't want Philadelphia cheesesteaks in the Philadelphia corridor, right? Come on. Matches. It's a Joe Biden kind of logic.
Or it could
They
be
probably get
camel
ice
cheese-
cream there too.
They could be cheese camel steaks, right?
Oh my
Ew.
gosh. I feel frustrated for Benjamin Netanyahu. He's a strong leader, and he knows when the United States has a strong leader with a backbone like Trump, and he also knows when we have a really weak, incompetent leader like Sleepy Joe, who takes 99% of his
40% of his administration has
moments
been
on the
vacation.
beach having a vacation.
40%.
Yeah. And I pray for him. I really do. I believe in the power of prayer, and I pray for Benjamin Netanyahu and the Israeli Defense Forces every single day. And I also just pray that Trump will be back in the White House. But I feel bad for him because, if he can't depend on us to support him and defend him, it's like, who's he going to depend on?
Yep.
I have a feeling Netanyahu's doing a lot of prayer also. I bet he's praying every day too.
I think Benjamin is regretting not supporting Trump as vigorously as he probably could have. Just saying.
Oh, Robert, any thoughts on that one?
Well, you got to have the Philadelphia corridor because otherwise you can have jihadis slipping in from Gaza.
Yep.
I mean, from Egypt into Gaza, from Sinai. And then the whole problem just keeps going. And so they have to be able to secure the entry points because even the most benign things that come in have been used for the jihad. Like, all the concrete that we see in the tunnels, that's hundreds and hundreds of miles of tunnels. Nobody had any idea how extensive they were. All that was humanitarian aid. All that concrete was brought into Gaza so they could build schools and hospitals and everything, and they used it for the jihad terror tunnels.
Yep.
So that
You're right.
demonstrates that the Israelis have to be able to know everything about what's coming in because everything that's coming in is going to be used to destroy them.
That's a
exactly.
good point.
Exactly. And the other thing is, it was funny watching the press conference. I mean, it was terrible watching the press conference in a lot of ways, but it was funny because he's sitting there spelling this out shows pictures of the Philadelphia corridor and says, you could drive a truck through this thing with all they're sending through. And he says, and by the way, next slide, here's a truck driving through it.
Yeah.
Oh, God.
The man's brilliant. I have to tell you that. Here's a quick one for you. A couple minutes. We have 2 minutes left here, so I'll throw it at all of you.
All right, we'll be fast.
Since the media and Democrats are packaging Kamala Harris like a pop star as a presidential candidate, you think she's going to start recording music and singing with auto-tune sometime soon as well?
Yes, absolutely.
I think so. I think she's going to probably do a duet with Taylor Swift called "My Heart Goes On with Biden." I think it'll be a hit. So, or maybe my wet something. She could do a duet with what's her name? What's her name? Big
the
fat
Cardi
chick?
B. Was it Cardi B
Cardi
or
B.
Khalees?
Oh,
I think
Cardi
both of
B.
them.
Cardi
Oh,
B
Cardi
and
B.
Kamala.
Oh,
Cardi
K
and
and K.
Kamala. That's
Yeah,
catchy.
or C and K. That could
There
be
you go.
something.
that would be good.
Oh,
Yeah. Boy, oh
I-
boy. Would that
I-
and they'd have Willie Brown in the video. That'd be great.
Well, let's put it this way: they are exes, and if she sings with Taylor Swift, they can both write songs about their ex.
That's right.
There we go.
oh my gosh!
This is
All my
fun. I
exes
mean,
live in Texas.
I
We have
got a
such great
question
ideas
for-
here.
So, Chris, do you know if Doug Emhoff is in his, he's in the middle of his transition? Does he still have a penis or not? Do you know? I don't. I mean, not that I
let's
really
not
want to
go
know.
there.
I'm just
Well,
curious.
I'm not sure if
Just
Dr.
curious.
Elena
I don't
Bobbitt
know
showed up
these.
near his house, but I'm pretty sure if anything happens,
Oh,
Carmela will
very
make sure to
good.
give her the call.
Elena Bobbitt.
And-
Well, we've come to an end of another show. I'm sure Robert's happy we're at the end of the show. So there you go.
God.
Robert,
Any-
you've been a great sport, and
any
people
words
have
of
learned a
wisdom
great
there?
deal.
Yeah,
You're
thanks. A lot of fun.
being here.
Folks.
So
Nice
we'd
talking.
like to have you back because we do encourage folks. We believe that being a bit, edgy and helping people understand things using a bit of humor is the best way to get them to remember and come back for more. So, Robert, we appreciate you being here and joining us in The Hard Truth. Seriously, Chris will be in contact with you to do something again
Great.
sometime in the near future. Yeah, thank you. It's been great. So, again, his book, Muhammad, A Critical Biography. Be sure and get it. There may be some scratch and
Excellent.
sniff things in the back regarding goats. I don't know that, but it could be.
Very cool.
You like goats? Go grab it.
Yeah.
If you don't like grubs, go grab it. But you
I like
will
goat
not go wrong
cheese.
by understanding the fundamental issues relating to why Islam is so. Can I use a technical term called wackadoodle? It's a
Yep.
wackadoodle.
Wackadoodle.
religion. Wackadoodle. I like that.
Yeah, I was originally going to call this Muhammad the Wackadoodle, but
There you go. See, that title
sounds
would
great.
have went well.
See,
So,
you have
I
a very
would
good sense
definitely
of humor.
That's
I like
right.
it. I like it.
So anyway, that's it for this week. We'll be back next week for another episode of Hard Truth. We'll see you then. Thanks.